Good morning. The scripture reading is going to be from the book of Mark 10 through 35, and I'm going to be reading from the New NIV version. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you, you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many."
Thank you, Al, for reading that to us. I think that goes along with our text this morning so well, and just remembering the things that the disciples have learned over a great period of time. If you would take your Bibles out, or your phones or your tablet or whatever device you have with you, and open up your Bible. There's plenty of Bibles in the pews also. Open up to John chapter 13. John chapter 13. The title of my sermon this morning is Proud Hearts and Dirty Feet. Figured that was a pretty good title for this. You think about the disciples and what Al just read to us. And if you look at Matthew chapter 19 and chapter 20, it says over and over again to them out of that section, "The first shall be last, and the last shall be first." It says that 3 times to them. And by the end of it all, they're in an argument over who's the greatest, and one's wanting to sit at the right, and one's wanting to sit at the left, and everything's all about them becoming number one. And in life, it's so easy, I think, for us to think about self and to try to promote self and try to become the greatest. I think the world teaches us that we should become the greatest, and we should take every opportunity we can to promote self and to become something. And although becoming something is very important, and doing something great with your life, I think, is something important, our Savior teaches us a different way to do that. He teaches us that we do that through service and through humility. And so this morning we're going to be reading John chapter 13 and taking a look at what he says about this. I think about this particular passage because it deals with service. And I think about my own personal life in dealing with service, and I remember a time in my life where I had some friends who were going out to serve. And you know, when you go out to serving others doesn't always work out well. Maybe your heart's in the right place, maybe it's not sometimes. But on this particular occasion, I knew a couple guys. They were going out and they were going to help a lady to weed out her garden. They were going to get all the weeds out of it and make it look pretty, make it look nice. And they went and they began doing this for her one morning. And she went off to work. And they weren't very good at knowing the difference between weeds and flowers. And so if you can imagine the direction that this goes in, it's probably not a good one. But they went about and they worked as hard as they could. They were pulling every weed, and they spent the entire day doing this. And so by the end of it, they're exhausted, they're tired, and they've been sweating all day long. And if you can imagine, the call that you would expect later on in the day would be one of gratitude, thanksgiving, all these things to tell you how wonderful of a job that you have done. But the call that they received instead was one with tears and sadness and heartache. And probably not very Christian-like either. But in this situation, this lady was so upset. And they probably didn't handle it in the best of way. We were all pretty young and still very naive and not handling things correctly. But their response to it was not very good at first. They were expecting gratitude, thanksgiving, and their attitude was, what? And she's demanding on the phone that she wants those flowers replaced. And I think about all of us as Christians, and our response to this is very important. In those times, it's very important. Because we have a choice. The world would tell us that you have worked all day long. There is no reason for you to replace these flowers. You have done the best of your ability, and this woman should be thankful. But I think as Christians, God calls us to something so much different. He calls us to be above that, and to serve no matter what, and to love people no matter what. Because the goal within serving is that people will know Jesus and see His love and know who God is. And so if you can imagine, the best outcome of this would be that they would go and they would gladly put those flowers back into her garden in hopes that this woman's husband would become a Christian one day. I don't know if he ever did. I don't know whatever happened with this situation. But we as Christians are called to serve and to love people and to go above and beyond and not be too proud to humble ourselves in situations like that. And that's what I see with Jesus in this particular passage. And so if you would, look at John chapter 13 with me. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew the time had come for Him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved His own who were in the world, He now showed them the full extent of His love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under His power, and that He had come from God and was returning to God. So He got up from the meal, took off His outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around His waist. After that, He poured water into a basin and began to wash His disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around Him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to Him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "A person who has had a bath only needs to wash his feet. His whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For He knew who was going to betray Him, and that was why He said not every one was clean. When He had finished washing their feet, He put on His clothes and returned to His place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" He asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. I think about this passage, and I think about this situation. All of the other Gospels talk about the instituting of the Lord's Supper, which is very important to us. It's why we meet on Sunday. It's why we come together. It's to remember Jesus. But John has a different account of this particular situation. We see here that it's just before Passover, and so if you can imagine the situation that these men are in, it's been a long day. It's probably hot outside. Everything is very dry. The dirt is dry. And so if you can imagine walking from place to place, and there's probably lots of people in Jerusalem at this time because it's just before the Passover. And so people have probably come from all over the place to be a part of this. And so you think about all the people that they've probably dealt with, so many people wanting to see Jesus and wanting to just catch a glimpse of him because he's becoming more and more popular, especially at this time in his life. So much that they are desiring to get rid of him. And so you look at this situation and you think about it. It's finally evening. It's time for a dinner that's been prepared for them. They come in one by one into this room. And each of them kneel down to the table and sit there. And if you can imagine what would have been like in this situation, you finally get to a resting place. You're finally to the point where you can just sit down and just relax and just take it easy and eat your dinner. But traditionally, people would have their feet washed before a meal. They knew that. Everyone at that table knew that. But within this environment, this was to be a servant's job. And it wasn't just any servant. It was to be the lowest of the lowest of the lowest servant's job. So whatever servant you had, even within the circle of servants, it was the lowest man. It was his job to do this. Within this room, you would say that if I was to ask you, you would probably ask you this question: how many lords and how many servants were there this day? You would probably answer 12 servants and 1 lord. But on this particular night, it comes across that there is 1 servant and 12 lords. No one is willing to get up and to wash anyone else's feet. And so that's why I titled this sermon, Proud Hearts and Dirty Feet. It only would take one person getting up and going and kneeling and washing each person's feet. But it would require them to humble themselves and to lower their position before each and every person within that room. It would require them to have a servant's heart, a humble heart, because no one in that room, according to the world, should be doing that job. But we as Christians, Jesus calls us to something else in this world. He calls us to serve and to love like him. And we'll look at that here in just a little bit. And so Jesus, it says, showing his, within the NIV, it says, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The full extent of his love. And I think this isn't talking about his greatest love. He is showing them how much he loves them. That it is never ending. And that he loves them so much that he's willing to take the role of a servant. And so he gets up and he goes and kneels before those who are to be below him. And one by one, he begins washing their feet, one after another, until he gets to Peter, right? And Peter doesn't want this to happen. No, Lord, you will never wash my feet. Not my feet. You can't wash my feet. And within this situation, Jesus tells him, you can't have anything to do with me unless you let me wash your feet. We're going to come back and talk about that here in just a second, about what that means. And so Jesus provides this example of washing their feet, and this is the example that they are to take and be his representatives and to go into all the world and show the love of Jesus to everyone. Let's take a step back, though. We're going to go back to verses 2 and 3. Actually, I got that wrong. Verses 1 and 2. We're going to take a look at these just for a second. It's interesting because we see here that John tells us there's three things that Jesus knows. There's three things that he knows, and we can see this even in verse 11. But there's three things that it tells us that he knows. It tells us it's his time to leave this world and go and be with the Father. And he knows that at this time. We also see that he knows that all things have been put under his power and under his authority. And then down in verse 11, we also see, and even within these verses, we see that Judas has been prompted and that he knows that Judas is going to betray him. And I was looking at these three things that Jesus knows and thinking about it, and if you really think about this for just a second, these three things are, and just having one of these things is enough sometimes for us not to serve. These three things, just having one of those things in your life sometimes will keep you from serving, I think. It will keep me from serving. If you think about it for just a second, it's his time to leave this world and go and be with the Father. It would be very easy to become very self-consumed at this point and think nothing about anyone else that's around you and what you need to be getting across to them. I look at this situation and think, within me, what would I do to get these men to start serving? Well, I would tell them that they should get up and start serving, right? Maybe that might be our response. But instead, Jesus gives the example of service. You think about all of power and authority has been given to him. Everything is under his power, and everything is under his control. And many times when we gain power and we gain control, we like to control the environment that's there and the people that are in it, versus getting up and actually serving and setting an example of what service looks like. Not that we need to teach everybody in the room either what service looks like, because I don't think that's necessarily what we're about either. But then also the third thing, he knows that Judas is going to betray him. Can you imagine Jesus coming around one by one, washing their feet? And he gets to Judas. And I don't think that he treated Judas any differently than he treated any of the others. The man who's going to betray him, the man who's going to sell his life for 30 pieces of silver. Jesus doesn't worry about what people are going to do, and he doesn't worry about what they're doing within this environment. But he gets up and he loves them and he serves them. And he humbles himself down on his knees. He washes their dirty feet. And I think so many times in my own personal life where I become concerned about what others are doing and not doing and what they're going to do. And so many times that can keep me from serving and serving with a heart that Jesus has called me to serve with. And so looking at these three things, I want to encourage you to think about those in your own personal life. Do you allow yourself to be concerned with yourself more than you do with the other people that are in the room? Today we're here to honor Jesus and to honor God. But so many times when I walk in this room, I'm thinking of nothing but myself and what I need to do for the day and what I need to accomplish for the day. Even as a minister, there's so many tasks that are around this building that need to be taken care of that I can forget about the people that walk in the room. And I think each of us can probably do the same, having children, having all of the things that we have going on, and we forget to serve the people that are within here and love on the people that are in here. And we can become consumed with talking about ourselves, talking about sports, and talking about everything else that's under the sun, and not talking about Jesus and serving and loving on the people that have come through the doors. I can also become concerned with power and authority. That people aren't going to listen to me, they're not going to do what I've asked them to do. And I think so many times that we can do that, and we worry about that if I don't control this situation and get this accomplished, that I'm going to lose my power and authority, that I'm going to lose what I'm doing. And we don't necessarily have that thought process going on, but our actions show that within ourselves. Instead of serving, we try to tell everybody else what to do. And I was listening even to a preacher just here recently. You know, we can teach quite a bit, and we can tell everybody else what to do. But as a minister, if I'm not out serving and loving on people, I've lost my teaching ability. I also look at this last one, being concerned with what others are doing or have not done or what they're going to do. Sometimes we allow this to consume our lives completely, and we worry about everyone else instead of ourselves and what Jesus would want us to be doing. Jesus has quite a few reasons not to serve. It's not his role, it's not his position according to the world, but he gets up, he takes off his outer garments, he wraps a towel around his waist, and he takes a basin and he takes a pitcher, he fills it full of water, and he kneels down at his disciples' feet. And he begins washing the dirt off their feet until he gets to Peter. And I think about Peter's situation here. Within this situation, he doesn't want Jesus to wash his feet. And we might commend him on that in some ways. If you think about it, I think it would be very humbling to have your Lord and Master, the King of Kings, come and kneel at your feet and begin washing them. But I also think about what Jesus says here. That if you won't allow me to do this, you can have no part with me. He talks about him being clean, but not every one of you being clean. And I think you can look to the future of this passage and how Jesus is going to do something so much greater than washing their feet. He does serve. He does get down on his knees, and this is something that is humbling to allow him to do. But I think sometimes in our lives, even in our lives today, it takes us being humble and accepting what he has done for us on dying on the cross. Being willing to admit that you're not perfect. Being willing to admit that you don't have it all together, and the only way that you're going to be saved and made perfect is through the blood of Jesus Christ takes great submission. And if you won't submit to Jesus washing your feet, then how are you going to submit to him dying on the cross for you? Peter's response here is great. Then don't just wash my feet, wash my hands and my head as well. Because he wants to be with Jesus. And that should be our same attitude, is just wanting to be with Jesus. Whatever you want, Jesus, I will submit to you and I will do what you want. Amen. And so here's my second. Here, let me give you my first point, because I just totally skipped over it, even though I made it. Don't worry about the things of this world. Don't worry about all the things that are going on. Second point within this part with Peter is we must submit to God and accept what he has done for us. Submit to God and accept what He has done for you. He died on that cross. Don't be too proud to accept that. Don't think that you've earned your salvation. You need Him in order to be in heaven one day. Here's my third point. Serve and love like Jesus. Serve and love like Jesus. No matter what's going on in this world, submit to Him and just love the people that are in this world. If you would, look down at 34 and 35. Jesus is preparing His disciples to be His representatives, to take this message and to go out and be His ambassadors, to spread His message to every single person that's out in this world. And they not only need to speak the right message, but they need to represent Him in their life as well, by their love and by the things that they do. They need to see Jesus within every single thing that's going on in their life. And He says this to them, after giving them this great example of washing their feet. He says, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." A new command I give you. The new command is that you love like Jesus. Love like Him. He set you the example just a few verses back. He set the example of what it looks like to love like Jesus. And I think about what's the difference between how Jesus served and how the world serves. Because doesn't the world serve? If you turn on the news, the hurricane, everything that's been going on in our past, did the world serve? Did they love people? Sure, definitely. We saw a lot of people doing a lot of good things. But I think about the difference between Jesus' love and the love of the world. Jesus' love doesn't allow anything to get in the way. He serves not out of obligation, not under compulsion. Because if you imagine this situation, couldn't Jesus have gotten up and said, well, I guess if no one else is going to serve, then I will. Right? We can be very guilty of having that attitude, can't we? No one else is going to do it, so I guess that leaves me. And it almost becomes a prideful thing to serve when no one else is. But that's not Jesus, and that's not Him in this moment. His love is so much different because He is willing to go low. He doesn't worry about that He's the master. He doesn't worry about that He's the teacher. He doesn't worry about everybody else within the room being too proud to do it. He doesn't worry about the betrayer that's within the room. He serves because He loves God. He serves because He loves God. Brothers and sisters, we will love others best when we love God the most. Let me say that one more time. You will love others best when you love God the most. When you make Him number one and you serve just because you love Him, you won't worry about anything else that's going on around you. You won't worry about what if somebody betrays me? What if they're my enemy? What if? We can ask it all day long. But we will just get up and we will serve and we will love. We as Christians should gladly serve. Even when we're in high positions, we should gladly serve in low positions. I think about all the positions that we have in life. And all of us probably have a situation somewhere in our life where the world considers us above others. But Jesus says, go low. Go low. serve. Don't put yourself above others. I think about within the church, we have elders, we have deacons, we have ministers, we have teachers. And I think about what Jesus would say to us from this passage. Elders, he would say, go low, serve the people of this church. Deacons, he would tell you, go low, don't put yourself over others. Ministers, go low. Don't just preach, serve. Teachers, he would tell you to serve the students that are within that classroom. Don't worry about your numbers. Don't worry about how many people are there. Don't worry about the comments that are made to you, but go low. Husbands, go low. I think how easy it is in today's world to think about us in our relationships. Jesus never forced anyone to submit to him, and he never called husbands to force their wives to submit to them. But he called us to go low and to serve them. Wives, he has called you to go low and to serve your husbands in the same exact way, so that you might win their heart over, right? If they're not Christians. Parents, go low. Serve your children. Love on your children. Care for them. Teach them what it looks like to serve. The list can go on and on. I think about our younger people. Maybe you're a big brother or a big sister. Go low. Serve your brother. Serve your sister. Serve the younger ones that are within your family. I think about this situation because the comment's always made that siblings, they're going to fight. Sure, they will have their arguments, but allowing it and expecting it and accepting that as a normal environment is not what Jesus has called us to within our households. Go low. Serve your brothers. Serve your sisters. Honor them the way that Jesus would. Within this church, we have been called by Jesus. He has set us the example today, and we have read that. Looking back at the very end of this, I want to read it to you one more time, and I've got one more passage for you. Verse 12, he says, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so. For that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth. No servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. And so the last point is serve and love like Jesus, because you will be blessed if you do. Church, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. And I'm not talking about the facilities. I'm not talking about finding a preacher. We have a lot of work to do around this community and a lot of people who need Jesus. A preacher will not change that. A preacher will not change that. One man will not change whether this congregation grows. What will change this community and what will change this church is us loving like Jesus did in this verse. Amen. Because when people see the love of Jesus and they see the difference from the world, they will want to be a part of this church and want to come and serve along with us. Don't ever let anyone tell you that a preacher is going to change this church, because it's not true. Jesus, let me restate that. Jesus will change this church when we allow Him to come inside of us and us love this community the way we have been called to. And we have a lot of work to do. Let's share that message with everyone that we can. By the love and by the things that we do, let us share the love of Jesus with every single person that we come in contact with by serving them and sharing the gospel message with them. This morning, if you need anything, we want to offer the invitation to you. You can come now as we stand and sing.